So, when people are giving advice on how to solve math problems on a multiple choice test, one of the most basic things that they never do is recognize that it's multiple choice. So, almost always there's four possible answers, and the way that those answers are structured gives you information about what the answer is, right? So, like I saw somebody do this one earlier. Find 7% of 108. So at a glance, it should be pretty fucking close to 7. It's not gonna be. It's not gonna be 8, right? For it to be 8, how much bigger would this have to be? It would have to be like that big. If you don't know what 100 divided by 7 is, you should learn it. It's just over 14. So, like, when you're tipping 15%, you're tipping basically a seventh. So, if it's $21, tip $3. That's real close to 15%. All right. And so, for this one, your options were this, 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 and this. Okay? So we know your first digit is 7 because we're not retarded. And now, what's 7 times 8? It's got to be that one. Holy shit, that was hard. But what he did is he's like ignoring all of the possible answers, and he's like, well, when I'm taking percentage of something, the first thing I do is I'll take 1% of it. And so that means that we move the decimal point 2 spaces. So we get this, and then we get this. Okay? And then we multiply by 7. So we get 7, and then point, and then 8 times 7 is 56. Oh, look at that, it's the second one. Like, bruh, you literally did that in the stupidest possible way. All of them, if we look at it, all of them have a decimal point in the same spot. You don't have to figure out where to put the decimal point. That's given to you. You don't have to fucking do that. You know where the decimal point goes. 7% of 100 would be 7. So 7% of something that's barely more than 100 is going to be 7 point something. Unless you're fucking retarded. So, like, what is this? What is all this work? What are you doing? You're not paying attention to the information that was given to you. In the real world, when you're doing a real thing, like when you've been contracted to do a real job, and somebody has given you this extra information, like these are your options, you don't ignore that and just do this shit. You pay attention to all the information that's given to you. And you should absolutely do that on a fucking math test too, because it makes it easier. There's way less room for error. Right? Why are we worried about where the decimal place goes? It goes in the same fucking place on every single possible answer. This is not a variable. Ignore it. Ignore it. The only question is, what's 8 times 7? That's actually the only question in this. Do you know what 8 times 7 is? That's really the only question here. Since you know 7 times 7 is about 50, it should be more than 50. So that leaves one possible answer. 7.50 something. Hey, look at that. It's got to be this one. And this is actually a clue. This is actually a clue. The fact that they're showing you 8s here is actually a clue. Because what this is it's actually this 8 being repeated. Because what they're doing is they are expecting you to be a dipshit, like the guy who showed how to do it, and they're expecting you to not look at the possible answers and just do the math. And if you do that, you run the risk of making mistakes. And one of the possible mistakes is getting confused as where the 8 was. So you end up with the 8 everywhere, like here. This is a possible way to screw this up. This 8 is literally this 8. It's the same one. That's what the test makers are expecting you to possibly do, is screw up in your multiplication and multiply the whole goddamn thing by 8. Or be like, oh, 7 times 8, well, is 56, so there's an 8. So it's 8.56. They're expecting you to make that mistake. These ones are red herrings. These ones are like, why would you ever multiply by 6? But notice something. There's a 6 there. So it's also sort of a clue. Multiply 7 by 6. 6 is in the answer. Where else would the 6 be coming from? Why else would we be getting this? There's nothing else that would bring this about. So this is actually also a clue. This is how tests are made. This is how test makers operate. Ignoring the multiple choice options is retarded, because there is a significant amount of information packed in there to help you solve it if you're not dumb as fuck and choose to just ignore it and like, no, I'm going to hide that and only do this. Like, you're an idiot. You're honestly, you're an idiot. Because this is a time to test. You want to do as well as you can, and you want to do as well as you can as quickly as you can. And if you do it quickly enough, you get to come back, because you still have time, you get to come back and check your answers with a fresh mind. Right? Because say there's 50 questions on this test. Right? We go through this once. By the time you get back to it, you don't remember this question very well. So your mind is in a completely new place. But because you've already answered it, you're not stressed. Okay? So you're less likely to make mistakes this time. Okay? So this is what we want. We want to be able to answer it quickly, efficiently, and be able to come back to it and look at it a second time after we've wiped our mind clear and done a bunch of other shit. That's what you want to do. That's how you pass a test. Sitting there like insisting that you do all of the work yourself and not look at what the possible answers are is just dumber than fuck. Why would you do that? Don't do that. That's how you fuck shit up. In the real world, if you have a real job where you need where you need shit to work, that's a terrible way to do things. You want to look at what your possible answers are. You want to consult with other people who have done similar things to this and get a sense of sort of where you should be, right? If everybody's giving you something like this, like, well, the decimal place has to be here, if absolutely every source is saying that, that's not a variable anymore. And you can focus on other things. This is useful information. This makes your job easier. Take it. Take it. What are you doing? What the fuck are you doing?